You can pass through the Philippines as a tourist, or leave feeling like you've brushed against a part of life not everyone gets to see. Kumusta? If there's something quietly surprising about the Philippines, it's this. The places that stay with you the most are often the ones you never planned to find. There are beaches you meant to visit just for a few photos, but somehow you end up staying longer than you intended because you're not quite ready to return to your old rhythm. There are places that look like nothing more than a quick check-in spot, but the longer you stay, the more you realize you're standing inside a much bigger story. This video isn't a list of the most beautiful places. It's 7 places that if you miss them, you might still travel across the Philippines, but you won't really understand it. And sometimes, the most unforgettable part of a journey is the one you never planned for in the first place. Number 1. El Nido, Palawan. If you ask anyone who's been to the Philippines, where's the one place worth going to? A lot of them will say El Nido. But here's the thing. When you hear too much about a place, you start to assume it's just another popular destination. Beautiful, crowded, and that's it. And honestly, when you first arrive, the feeling can be a bit underwhelming. Not because it isn't beautiful, but because you've already seen those perfect images too many times online. You step out, look around, see a small town, a little dusty, a little busy, and you start thinking, is that all? But El Nido isn't the kind of place that impresses you right away. It sinks in slowly, usually on the second day or the third, when you're on a boat, passing towering limestone cliffs, or watching the water shift from turquoise to deep blue, then suddenly opening into a quiet lagoon so still you can hear the paddle touching the surface. That's when something changes. You stop feeling like you're traveling and more like you've stepped out of a different pace of life. I met a couple there. They only planned to stay for 2 days, but then it turned into 5, then a week. Not because they hadn't finished all the check-in spots, but because they no longer felt the need to. And that's the strangest thing about El Nido. People come here for the views, but what keeps them is the feeling that there's no need to rush. If you're used to trips where you have to complete everything, check every place, take every photo, El Nido might feel uncomfortably slow at first. But if you stay long enough, you'll understand. Sometimes, a place becomes unforgettable, not because there's so much to do, but because it gives you a reason to pause. Number 2. Banaue Rice Terraces. The first time people see Banaue Rice Terraces, the reaction is often the same. It's beautiful, but I feel like I've seen something like this before. And that's understandable. Rice terraces aren't exactly rare if you've traveled around parts of Asia, but Banaue isn't the kind of beauty that makes you say, wow, right away, and reach for your phone. It's different. And if you're not paying attention, you might miss what matters most. These terraces weren't built for tourism. They've been here for over 2,000 years, carved by hand, layer by layer, by the Ifugao people, in a time with no machines, no technology, just time, and the decision to stay. To stay, even when they could have moved down to easier land. A local guide once said something very simple. Our ancestors didn't build this for outsiders to take photos. They built it to live. It sounds ordinary, but if you stand there long enough, watching each layer wrap around the mountains, you begin to feel how heavy that truth is. Because keeping these terraces alive isn't just history. People here still have to take care of them every single day. And truth is, fewer and fewer young people want to continue that work. That's the part most travelers don't see. You come to Banaue and you see a wonder. But for many who live here, it's a responsibility that's slowly becoming harder to hold on to. And there's a quiet moment when you realize what you're looking at isn't just scenery, but the trace of a choice carried across generations. Not everyone notices it. But once you do, you won't see Banaue as just another destination anymore. Number 3. Coron Island. If El Nido is the place that slows you down, then Coron Island is the place that makes you look down, literally. Most people come here for the clear water, the lakes, the viewpoints from above. And yes, Places like Kayangan Lake are undeniably stunning, but there's something not everyone experiences or even fully knows about: the wrecks beneath the surface. Not just any ships, warships. If you've ever tried diving, or even just snorkeling, and you look beneath the water, you'll see massive metal structures resting silently on the ocean floor. No signs, no explanations, right in front of you. Just you, and something that belongs to another time. There's a strange moment many people experience here. At first, you still feel like a traveler. Wow, this place is beautiful. But then you realize you're swimming right above a ship that was sunk during war, and the feeling begins to shift. Have you ever been somewhere and didn't know whether you were supposed to feel excited or stay quiet? Coron has that effect. I remember someone on our boat that day, not a professional diver, just trying it for the first time. When he got back on board, he didn't say much, just sat there, looking at the water for a long time. Then he quietly said, "Down there, everything felt so still." It sounds simple, but if you've ever been in a place where the past still feels present, you'll understand. And maybe that's what makes Coron different. People come for the views, but what stays with them is something harder to name. The moment you realize you're not just exploring a place, but touching a piece of history without anyone needing to explain it. Number 4. Mayon Volcano. If you've ever seen photos of Mayon Volcano, the first reaction is almost always the same. How is it that perfect? A near-symmetrical cone, standing alone in the landscape, seen from a distance, it almost looks painted rather than real. And when you stand in front of it for the first time, that feeling doesn't go away. You'll want to take photos, find the right angle, wait for the clouds to clear from the summit, the usual rhythm of a trip. But Mayon isn't just a place you come to admire. Did you know that almost perfect shape is actually a sign of how active the volcano is? Layer after layer of lava, built up through repeated eruptions, is what created that near-flawless form, which means the beauty you're looking at was shaped by destruction. It sounds a bit contradictory, doesn't it? There's something locals in Albay are used to, but visitors don't always notice. They don't live with Mayon as just scenery, but as something that can change at any time. Some days, the sky is clear, and it looks calm, almost peaceful. But there are also times when nearby areas have to evacuate because volcanic activity rises. Imagine this: if every morning you woke up, opened your door, and saw something so beautiful it almost didn't feel real, yet knew it could destroy everything around it if it awakened. How would you look at it? I once heard someone say it this way: "We're proud of Mayon, but we never forget what it is." And maybe that's what makes this place different. People come for its near-perfect beauty, but if you stay a little longer, you begin to understand not everything that looks perfect is safe. Number 5. Chocolate Hills, Bohol. Chocolate Hills is the kind of place where, if you only see photos, you might think they're just a bunch of round hills. But when you're actually standing there, the feeling isn't that simple. The first thing that hits you isn't the height or grandeur, it's the repetition. Hundreds, then thousands of nearly identical hills stretching so far you can't tell where they end. Look a little longer, and something starts to feel off, like nature doesn't usually work this way. Have you ever seen a place that becomes harder to understand the more you look at it? That's what it feels like here. There's no single explanation everyone fully agrees on for how these hills were formed. Some say it's geology, and it makes sense. But then you hear a completely different local legend. And strangely, and that also makes sense in its own way. So you find yourself standing between two ways of understanding, one grounded in science, the other in imagination. And neither one really wins. I remember a group of visitors nearby. They weren't talking about whether it was beautiful or not. They kept going back and forth, debating which explanation was more believable. It looked casual, but really, everyone was trying to make sense of what they were seeing. And the more you try to explain it, the more you realize maybe this place doesn't need a final answer. Chocolate Hills doesn't overwhelm you in an obvious way. It doesn't demand a reaction, but it leaves you with something unusual, a feeling that isn't quite finished, like you've seen something familiar and not familiar at the same time. And sometimes, it's the places you can't fully explain that stay with you the longest. Number 6. Siargao Island. Siargao Island is often introduced in a very simple way, the surfing capital of the Philippines. And yes, if you're a surfer, this is almost a must-visit. But what's interesting is, a lot of people come here not because of the waves. They come because they heard it's beautiful, or just want to try somewhere different from Boracay or Cebu. The plan is simple. Stay a few days, rest, take some photos, then move on. But somehow, that plan rarely goes as expected. Have you ever gone somewhere planning to stay 3 days and then realized you had no reason to leave? Siargao has that kind of feeling. Not because there's too much to do. In fact, if you're used to packed itineraries, it might even feel like there's too little. But that less is exactly what begins to change things. A morning might just be a motorbike ride down a long coconut road, wind hitting a little stronger than usual. Nothing special. An afternoon at a small seaside cafe, just looking out at the water. Nothing you'd call a must-do. And yet, you don't feel like anything is missing. I once met a freelancer who said he'd stay for a week. That week turned into a month. Not because he fell in love with the place in some dramatic way, but because he realized his life there already felt enough. He didn't need much more. It sounds simple, but not everyone recognizes that easily. Siargao doesn't try to impress you loudly. It won't give you constant wow moments, but it does something else. It quietly makes you question your own pace of life. And maybe what brings people back isn't just the waves, but the feeling that, for a moment, had they found a slower, lighter version of life, something that's hard to hold on to anywhere else. Number 7. Taal Volcano. Taal Volcano is one of those places where, if you only look at photos, you wouldn't think it's that dangerous. A volcano sitting quietly in the middle of a lake, surrounded by calm water, especially from Tagaytay, it almost feels peaceful. You sit at a cafe, looking out into the distance, and everything seems still. A soft breeze, open space, nothing out of place. Everything feels fine. But that sense of fine is exactly what makes this place different. Have you ever been somewhere that looks completely normal, but you know it isn't entirely so? That's what Taal feels like. It's one of the most active volcanoes in the Philippines, and in the past, it has erupted without much warning, which means the calm view in front of you doesn't always stay that way. People who live around here have grown used to it. And life goes on. Businesses open, people work, cafes welcome visitors as usual. But deep down, everyone understands that things can change quickly. I once heard a local say something simple. We live here because it's beautiful, but also because we've learned to accept that risk. It sounds light, but when you think about it, it isn't light at all. Taal isn't the kind of place that overwhelms you or hits you with strong emotion right away. It doesn't need to. It just sits there, quiet, familiar, close enough to make you forget what it really is. And maybe what people remember about Taal isn't just the view, but that moment when you realize there are places in this world that look peaceful on the surface, but beneath that calm, something is always waiting. You might not remember all 7 names after a few months, but if you've truly stood in these places, not just passed through, then the feeling they leave behind stays longer than you expect. The Philippines doesn't always impress in loud ways, but it has its own way of making people come back, or at least remember. And if something in these stories felt familiar or made you want to slow down just a little when you travel, then maybe you've understood this place in a way not everyone does. Thank you for staying until the end. And maybe one day, you'll find yourself standing in one of these places with a story of your own.